Imagine sitting at the most exclusive dinner table in the world, where every movement of a fork carries weight, where the placement of a napkin can end careers, and where a simple gesture from the Queen could determine the fate of international relations. This isn't fiction, this is the reality of royal dining, where an ancient code of silence signals has governed the most powerful families on Earth for centuries. When Princess Diana unknowingly broke 17 different table protocols during her first formal dinner at Buckingham Palace, she had no idea that her every move was being watched, analyzed, and quietly corrected by a network of staff who communicated through gestures so subtle that most guests never even noticed them happening. What she discovered that night would change how she understood power itself. Behind the golden cutlery and crystal glasses lies a secret language more complex than any computer code, more precise than military operations, and more consequential than diplomatic treaties. These are the silent table signals of the royal family, and they reveal truths about power, control, and human nature that have been hidden from the public for generations. Welcome to a world where dinner is never just dinner, where every meal is a carefully choreographed performance, and where the most important conversations happen without a single word being spoken. The grand doors of Buckingham Palace's state dining room open with barely a whisper, but, inside, Margaret Thatcher felt her confidence waver for the first time in decades. The Iron Lady, who had faced down trade unions and foreign dignitaries without flinching, found herself intimidated by something far more subtle than political opposition, a dinner table. It was 1979, and Thatcher was attending her first formal dinner as Prime Minister. She had prepared for policy discussions, economic debates, and political maneuvering. What she hadn't prepared for was the realization that she was about to participate in a silent ballet of power that had been perfected over centuries. As she approached the massive mahogany table, adorned with golden candelabras and place settings worth more than most people's homes, Thatcher noticed something peculiar. Every staff member in the room seemed to be watching not just the guests, but each other. Their eyes moved in patterns, quick glances exchanged across the room like a secret Morse code. Queen Elizabeth II entered with her characteristic composed demeanor, but those who knew what to look for could read volumes in her subtle movements. As she approached her chair, she paused for exactly 3 seconds, a signal so small that most guests assumed she was simply gathering her thoughts. In reality, this tiny pause told the head butler that tonight's service would follow Protocol 7, a specific sequence of signals used when dealing with new political leadership. The Queen's private secretary, standing near the far wall, responded by adjusting his cufflinks twice. To any observer, it appeared to be a nervous habit. In truth, it was confirmation that he had understood the signal and would monitor the Prime Minister's reactions throughout the evening for future briefings. As the guests took their seats, another layer of the silence system activated. Lady-in-waiting Susan Hussey, positioned across the room, held her pearls in a specific way that indicated to the wine steward that alcoholic beverages should be served conservatively tonight. The assessment had been made in seconds. Thatcher was clearly nervous, and nervous politicians sometimes spoke too freely after wine. The placement of cutlery alone told a story that most diners never suspected. When the Queen positioned her knife and fork in perfect parallel lines on her plate, it meant the conversation was proceeding as planned. When she placed them in a slight X formation, it signaled that the topic should be changed. Most remarkably, when she rested her fork with its tines pointing toward her wineglass, it meant that someone at the table had said something that required immediate private discussion with her advisors after dinner. Throughout history, these signals had evolved from practical necessity. In the early days of royal dining, when assassination attempts were common and foreign diplomats couldn't always be trusted, the ability to communicate silently could mean the difference between life and death. Over time, the system had evolved into something far more sophisticated, a way to manage information, control conversations, and maintain the delicate balance of power that kept the monarchy relevant in a changing world. But the signals weren't just about security or protocol. They were about something much deeper, the management of human psychology at the highest levels of society. Royal staff had learned that people revealed their true thoughts most clearly when they believed they weren't being observed or analyzed. The silent signal system allowed them to study, categorize, and respond to these revelations without their subjects ever knowing they were being read like an open book. Margaret Thatcher, despite her political acumen, had no idea that her every gesture was being interpreted and catalogued. When she nervously adjusted her necklace 3 times during the soup course, it told the Queen's private secretary that she was more anxious about economic policy than her public statements suggested. When she kept glancing at her watch during the fish course, it indicated that she was eager to discuss something specific, information that would prove valuable in future negotiations. The most sophisticated aspect of the system wasn't the signals themselves, but how they created a web of information that flowed seamlessly through the royal household. Every observed behavior, every interpreted gesture, every noted reaction became part of a vast database of human intelligence that informed how the royal family approached relationships with political leaders, foreign dignitaries, and influential figures. Princess Anne, seated 4 chairs down from Thatcher, had mastered these signals by the age of 12. She could conduct an entire conversation with her mother using nothing more than the way she held her napkin, the angle of her water glass, and the timing of when she reached for different pieces of cutlery. To outsiders, she appeared to be simply enjoying her meal. In reality, she was receiving detailed instructions about how to handle a delicate question about equestrian funding that was likely to come up during the port service. The beauty of the system lay in its invisibility. Guests left these dinners feeling that they had participated in pleasant, spontaneous conversations. They had no idea that every topic had been carefully selected based on real-time analysis of their comfort levels, that every pause in conversation had been precisely timed, and that their own reactions were being stored away for future use. Even more remarkable was how the signals adapted to different cultural contexts. When hosting Japanese officials, the staff employed an entirely different set of gestures that took into account Asian concepts of face and hierarchy. When entertaining American politicians, the signals became more direct and less subtle, matching what palace psychologists had determined was the American preference for clearer communication. The training required to master this system was extraordinary. New staff members spent months learning not just what each signal meant, but how to deliver them with the right timing, intensity, and subtlety. They practiced until they could communicate complex information while appearing to do nothing more than straighten a curtain or refill a water glass. Perhaps most importantly, they learned to read the signals that weren't intentional, the unconscious gestures that revealed what people were really thinking. When an ambassador drummed his fingers in a specific pattern, it usually meant he was hiding something. When a prime minister touched her earring repeatedly, it indicated she was preparing to ask for something significant. When a foreign leader kept adjusting his tie, it suggested he was uncomfortable with the current topic and might be more open to discussion on other matters. This silent language extended beyond the dining room into every aspect of royal protocol. At garden parties, the way the Queen held her handbag could direct security to pay attention to specific guests. During walkabouts, the angle of Prince Philip's hat brim told photographers which areas to avoid. At state ceremonies, the positioning of various royals communicated complex messages about Britain's relationships with other nations to those who knew how to interpret the visual language. The system had prevented diplomatic incidents, revealed security threats, and provided the royal family with insights into human nature that influenced everything from policy recommendations to marriage arrangements. It was, in effect, a form of intelligence gathering so sophisticated that it made traditional espionage seem crude by comparison. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these silent signals was what they revealed about power itself. True power, the royal family had learned over centuries, wasn't about making grand pronouncements or obvious displays of authority. It was about understanding people so completely that you could predict their behavior, influence their decisions, and guide their actions without them ever realizing they were being directed. As Margaret Thatcher left Buckingham Palace that evening, she felt the dinner had gone exceptionally well. She had enjoyed stimulating conversation, felt listened to and respected, and believed she had successfully established a good working relationship with the royal family. She had no idea that she had just been subjected to the most sophisticated form of psychological analysis ever developed, or that the insights gained from reading her unconscious signals would influence how the monarchy approached her policies for years to come. The death of Princess Diana changed everything about royal dining protocols, though the public would never know it. In the weeks following the tragic accident in Paris, Queen Elizabeth II sat in the Chinese dining room at Buckingham Palace, surrounded by her most trusted advisors, participating in what would later be remembered as one of the most crucial silent conversations in modern royal history. The meeting appeared to be a simple lunch discussing flower arrangements for upcoming events. In reality, it was an emergency session to completely overhaul the signal system that had governed royal behavior for generations. Diana's death had exposed something the palace had never anticipated: their ancient methods of reading and influencing people had failed to account for the power of modern media and public sentiment. Sir Robert Fellows, the Queen's private secretary and, ironically, Diana's brother-in-law, sat across from Her Majesty with documents that appeared to be menu options for upcoming state dinners. The papers actually contained detailed analysis of how Diana had unconsciously rejected royal signal protocols throughout her marriage, and how her natural, unguarded responses had made her more relatable to the public than anyone in the royal family had been in decades. The Queen's response was barely perceptible to anyone unfamiliar with the royal signal system. She placed her teacup down with the handle pointing directly toward Fellows, a gesture that meant proceed with complete honesty, regardless of discomfort. Then, she folded her napkin in half and placed it precisely parallel to her plate edge, signaling that everything discussed would be held in absolute confidence, beyond even normal royal discretion. What followed was a revelation that shook the foundation of how the royal family understood their own power. Diana had never fully learned the silent signals, but her inability to participate in the hidden conversations had actually become her greatest strength. While other royals communicated through carefully controlled gestures and meaningful glances, Diana had responded naturally and emotionally to situations. The public had recognized this authenticity and loved her for it. Lady Susan Hussey, the Queen's longest-serving lady-in-waiting, demonstrated this by recounting a state dinner from 1987. While other royals had used traditional signals to manage a difficult conversation with a controversial foreign minister, Diana had simply asked direct questions and shown genuine emotion when discussing human rights issues. The foreign minister, unaccustomed to such directness from royalty, had found himself revealing far more information than he had intended. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The royal family had spent centuries perfecting a system designed to understand and influence human behavior, only to discover that their most effective member had been the one who ignored the system entirely. Prince Charles had struggled with this during his marriage to Diana. He had been trained from birth to communicate through the elaborate signal system, to read people through their unconscious gestures, and to reveal nothing of his own inner thoughts through his behavior. Diana's emotional directness had initially confused him, then frustrated him, and, finally, made him realize how much of his own authentic self had been sacrificed to royal protocol. The palace archives, stored in climate-controlled rooms beneath Buckingham Palace, contained decades of detailed observations about Diana's behavioral patterns. Royal staff had dutifully recorded her every gesture, trying to fit her actions into their traditional framework of analysis. What they had found instead was someone who genuinely cared about people in a way that couldn't be quantified or systematized. During one particularly revealing dinner with African diplomats, Diana had broken 17 different signal protocols within the first hour. She had asked personal questions about their families, expressed genuine emotion about suffering she had seen in documentaries, and even reached across the table to touch someone's hand while making a point. Traditional royal analysis would have labeled such behavior as uncontrolled and problematic. Instead, the African diplomats had left the dinner describing Diana as the most impressive royal they had ever encountered. They spoke of feeling truly heard and understood for the first time in their diplomatic careers. Several later credited that dinner as the moment they began to believe that the British monarchy could be a genuine force for positive change in the world. This created a profound dilemma for the surviving royals. The signal system that had served them so well for centuries was suddenly revealed to be a potential barrier to genuine human connection. Yet abandoning it entirely would leave them vulnerable in ways they couldn't predict. The solution they developed would transform royal protocol forever. Rather than eliminating the signal system, they decided to expand it. The traditional signals would remain for formal occasions and diplomatic necessities, but new protocols were developed for situations that required genuine emotional connection. Staff were trained to recognize when authentic response was more valuable than controlled communication. The Queen herself became the master of this hybrid approach. She could still conduct an entire conversation through subtle gestures when dealing with potentially dangerous political situations, but she also learned to recognize moments when dropping the signals entirely would be more effective. The skill lay in knowing which approach to use when. This evolution wasn't without its challenges. Prince William and Prince Harry, still children when Diana died, had to learn both systems, the traditional silent signals their grandmother had mastered, and the more authentic emotional responses their mother had embodied. The psychological complexity of switching between these modes of communication required training that was unlike anything the royal family had ever provided before. Royal staff noticed that William seemed more naturally inclined toward the traditional approach, while Harry gravitated toward Diana's more direct style. This difference would later influence how each prince was prepared for public duties and shaped their relationships with both the media and the public. The most significant change came in how the royal family approached state dinners and formal occasions. Previously, these events had been entirely managed through the silent signal system, with every moment choreographed and every response calculated. After Diana's death, space was created within these formal structures for moments of genuine interaction. Queen Elizabeth II pioneered what palace insiders called signal breaks, predetermined moments during formal events when traditional protocols were suspended and royals were expected to engage authentically with guests. These breaks were carefully timed and limited, but they transformed the atmosphere of royal occasions. The first major test of this new approach came during a state dinner for Nelson Mandela in 1996. The Queen used traditional signals to navigate the complex diplomatic elements of the evening, but during the dessert course, she implemented a signal break that allowed for genuine conversation about Mandela's experiences and hopes for South Africa. The result was electric. Mandela later described it as one of the most meaningful conversations of his post-prison life, while other guests reported feeling they had witnessed something historically significant. The dinner was considered such a success that it became a model for future state occasions. However, this new hybrid system required even more sophisticated training for royal staff. They had to learn not just when to watch for traditional signals, but how to recognize when authenticity was called for and how to protect those moments from outside interference. Security protocols had to be adjusted, media management became more complex, and the psychological demands on both royals and staff increased significantly. The most challenging aspect was training royals to switch between modes of communication seamlessly. During a single conversation, they might need to use traditional signals to communicate with staff about security concerns while simultaneously engaging authentically with guests about personal matters. The mental discipline required for this kind of dual-track communication was extraordinary. Princess Anne became particularly skilled at this approach, developing what palace insiders called transparent signaling, a method of communicating necessary information to staff while maintaining authentic engagement with guests. She could alert security to a potential problem, request a topic change, and express genuine interest in a guest's story all within the same 30-second period. The evolution of royal signaling after Diana's death revealed something profound about human communication itself. The most effective approach wasn't pure authenticity or pure control, but the wisdom to know when each was appropriate and the skill to transition between them seamlessly. This insight would influence how the royal family approached public life for generations to come. By the late 1990s, a new generation of royal staff had been trained in what was quietly called the Diana Protocol, the integration of authentic emotional response with traditional royal signal management. These individuals became the backbone of a modernized monarchy that could honor its historical traditions while remaining relevant to contemporary society. The ultimate irony was that Diana, who had struggled with and often rejected the traditional signal system, had inadvertently created something far more sophisticated than what existed before. Her legacy wasn't the abandonment of royal protocols, but their evolution into something that honored both the wisdom of tradition and the power of authentic human connection. The most closely guarded secret in royal protocol wasn't about security threats or state secrets, it was about marriage. For centuries, the royal family had used their sophisticated signal system to evaluate potential spouses, analyze existing relationships, and even orchestrate romantic outcomes. When Catherine Middleton first entered royal circles, she had no idea that every interaction was being studied through a lens of behavioral analysis more intense than any psychological examination. The process began long before Kate's first formal dinner at Buckingham Palace. Royal protection officers, trained in the signal system, had been discreetly observing her behavior during public appearances with William since 2004. Every gesture, every reaction, every unconscious movement was catalogued and analyzed by specialists who understood human psychology at levels that would impress clinical researchers. What they discovered about Kate was remarkable. Unlike many previous royal girlfriends who either tried too hard to impress or seemed overwhelmed by royal protocol, Kate exhibited what palace analysts called natural adaptation. She instinctively modified her behavior to match the formality of different situations without appearing forced or artificial. During a casual lunch at Highgrove with Prince Charles, Kate had demonstrated something that impressed even veteran royal staff. When the conversation turned to a sensitive topic about press coverage, she had naturally positioned her water glass in a way that blocked her facial expressions from a staff member she didn't know well. This wasn't a trained response, it was an instinctive understanding of privacy and discretion that couldn't be taught. The Queen's evaluation of Kate came during a weekend at Balmoral in 2009. For 3 days, Her Majesty employed every aspect of the royal signal system to understand this young woman who might someday be queen. The testing was so subtle that Kate never realized it was happening, which was precisely the point. During their first evening together, the Queen tested Kate's observational skills by gradually adjusting her own behavior throughout dinner. She changed how she held her cutlery, modified her posture slightly, and altered the timing of her responses to conversation. A person trained in royal protocols would have noticed these changes and responded accordingly. Someone completely oblivious would have missed them entirely. Kate's response was perfect. She noticed the changes, her own posture shifted to match the Queen's, and she unconsciously adjusted her speaking pace to align with Her Majesty's rhythm, but she didn't appear conscious of doing so. This suggested someone with excellent social instincts who could adapt naturally to royal expectations without losing her own personality. The most crucial test came during a walk around the Balmoral grounds. The Queen used a technique she had developed over decades. She would make seemingly casual comments while watching for micro-expressions and unconscious physical responses that revealed true feelings. When she mentioned the challenges of royal duty, Kate's pupils dilated slightly and her breathing became shallower, signs of genuine concern rather than dismissive confidence. When she spoke about the rewards of service, Kate's shoulders relaxed and she leaned slightly forward, indicating authentic interest rather than polite pretense. What impressed the Queen most was Kate's response to a comment about media attention. Rather than offering reassurances about being able to handle it or expressing anxiety about the pressure, Kate had paused, considered the statement seriously, and then asked a thoughtful question about how previous generations of royals had managed the balance between private life and public duty. This response demonstrated intelligence, self-awareness, and respect for the institution, exactly the qualities the Queen believed were essential for future royal success. Prince Philip's evaluation was characteristically direct. During a clay pigeon shooting session, he observed how Kate handled both success and failure. When she hit targets, she showed pleasure but didn't become overconfident. When she missed, she remained composed and focused on improvement rather than becoming frustrated or making excuses. Philip later told the Queen that Kate had the temperament of a winner without the ego of one, high praise from someone not known for sugarcoating his opinions. The signal analysis extended to Kate's family dynamics during visits to Buckingham Palace. Royal staff observed how she interacted with her parents and siblings, looking for signs of dysfunction, manipulation, or inappropriate ambition that might later cause problems for the monarchy. What they found was a family that genuinely supported each other without attempting to use Kate's relationship for personal gain. Particularly impressive was how Kate's mother, Carol Middleton, handled royal protocol. During her first formal tea with the Queen, Carol had demonstrated perfect instinctual behavior. She was respectful without being obsequious, confident without being presumptuous, and proud of her daughter without being boastful. The royal staff's assessment was that the Middleton family understood their role and could be trusted to support rather than complicate Kate's position. The most sophisticated aspect of the royal evaluation involved testing Kate's response to various types of pressure. During different visits, palace staff would create subtle stressful situations, a changed schedule, an uncomfortable conversation topic, or an unexpected protocol requirement, and observe how Kate managed these challenges. In every case, Kate's response impressed the analysts. She remained calm under pressure, adapted quickly to changed circumstances, and never showed irritation toward staff or family members even when situations became frustrating. Most importantly, she maintained her genuine personality even when stressed, suggesting that royal pressures wouldn't force her to become someone fundamentally different. The Queen's private assessment, recorded in documents that remain classified, reportedly described Kate as having the rare combination of strength and flexibility that has characterized the most successful royal marriages. This evaluation influenced not just the family's acceptance of Kate, but their approach to preparing her for royal life. The training Kate received before her marriage was unlike anything previously provided to incoming royals. Rather than simply teaching her royal protocols, the instruction was customized based on the psychological profile developed through years of signal analysis. Trainers knew exactly how Kate learned best, what types of pressure she handled well, and where she might need additional support. The signal system also revealed interesting insights about William during his relationship with Kate. Palace analysts noted that his behavior became more relaxed and authentic when she was present, suggesting that Kate brought out qualities in him that would benefit his future role as king. Their relationship dynamics indicated genuine partnership rather than dependency or dominance on either side. Perhaps most remarkably, the royal family's analysis revealed that Kate and William had unconsciously developed their own signal system during their long courtship. They could communicate complex information through subtle touches, shared glances, and coordinated movements that showed deep understanding and mutual support. This natural synchronization suggested a relationship foundation that could withstand the pressures of royal life. The wedding planning itself became an opportunity for further analysis. How Kate handled the stress of organizing a global event, managed family dynamics under intense scrutiny, and maintained her composure during what would be one of the most watched events in history provided final confirmation of the royal family's assessment. On the morning of the wedding, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly told her dresser that Kate had passed every test except the final one, the test of time. The signal analysis could predict how someone might handle royal life based on their personality and behavior patterns, but only years of actual experience could confirm whether those predictions were accurate. The integration of Kate into the royal family marked a new evolution in how the monarchy approached relationships. The traditional arranged marriages of previous centuries had given way to love matches, but the royal family had learned to use their sophisticated understanding of human behavior to evaluate these relationships more thoroughly than most families could ever imagine. The success of Kate's integration vindicated the royal approach to relationship analysis. By understanding her psychological makeup so thoroughly before marriage, they were able to provide support tailored to her specific needs and strengths. The result was someone who enhanced the monarchy's public image while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that royal duties required. Years later, when Kate began taking on major royal responsibilities, palace staff noticed something remarkable. She had unconsciously absorbed many aspects of the royal signal system without ever being formally trained in it. Her ability to read social situations, manage group dynamics, and communicate effectively in high-pressure environments had been enhanced by observing and adapting to royal family behavior patterns. The most significant long-term impact was on how the royal family approached future relationships. The thorough analysis of Kate's suitability had provided a blueprint for evaluating potential royal spouses that balanced respect for personal choice with the practical requirements of royal life. This approach would later influence how they assessed and prepared other family members' partners for royal responsibilities. The Kate Middleton analysis represented the culmination of centuries of royal relationship management, a system sophisticated enough to predict compatibility and success while respecting individual autonomy and genuine emotion. It was perhaps the most successful application of royal signal analysis in the modern era, producing a partnership that strengthened both the individuals involved and the institution they served. The most dangerous dinner in royal history nearly started a war, and it was saved only by a single, perfectly executed silent signal that took less than 3 seconds to deliver. The date was March 15, 2003, and tensions over the Iraq War had brought British-American relations to their lowest point in decades. President George W. Bush was visiting Buckingham Palace at a moment when a single misunderstood gesture could have diplomatic consequences lasting generations. The challenge facing the royal family was unprecedented. They needed to maintain Britain's special relationship with America while avoiding any appearance of endorsing policies that were deeply unpopular with the British public. Traditional diplomatic language was inadequate for such delicate maneuvering. Only the most sophisticated silent communication could navigate these treacherous waters. Queen Elizabeth II spent hours with her advisors developing what they privately called the Equilibrium Protocol, a series of signals designed to show respect for President Bush personally while maintaining careful neutrality on controversial policies. Every gesture, every seating arrangement, every moment of the evening was planned to communicate precise messages to multiple audiences simultaneously. The complexity was staggering. The royal signals had to convey different messages to President Bush, British government officials, international media, and the American delegation, all while appearing to be nothing more than elegant hospitality. It was diplomatic theater at its most sophisticated, where the stakes were measured in global relationships and the margin for error was zero. President Bush, unaware of the intricate signal system surrounding him, arrived at Buckingham Palace believing he was attending a straightforward state dinner. He had no idea that he was about to participate in one of the most carefully choreographed exercises in international communication ever attempted. The first critical moment came during the receiving line. As Bush approached the Queen, she performed what appeared to be a simple adjustment of her brooch. In reality, this gesture told her private secretary that the president seemed more relaxed than expected, meaning the evening's conversation could proceed with slightly less caution than originally planned. The seating arrangement itself was a masterpiece of silent diplomacy. By placing Bush between herself and the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen could control conversation flow while Prince Philip's well-known directness would serve as a pressure release valve if tensions became too high. The Archbishop of Canterbury was positioned where he could change topics to more neutral ground if political discussions became uncomfortable. During the soup course, the first diplomatic crisis emerged. Bush made a comment about British support for American military action that could have been interpreted as presumptuous by other guests. The Queen's response was instant and, invisible to most observers, she lifted her soup spoon in a specific way that told the Archbishop to prepare to redirect conversation, while simultaneously catching Prince Philip's eye with a glance that meant remain neutral. The real danger came during the main course when a British minister began expressing views that contradicted American policy. The conversation was becoming heated, and international media representatives present were taking notes that could become tomorrow's headlines about Anglo-American discord. It was then that the Queen executed perhaps the most masterful piece of silent diplomacy in royal history. She reached for her wineglass with her left hand instead of her right, a signal that told the head butler to begin the toast sequence immediately, cutting off the problematic conversation before it could escalate further. Simultaneously, she placed her napkin on her lap in a specific fold that told Prince Charles to begin discussing cultural topics that both sides could safely embrace. The transition was so smooth that most guests assumed it was coincidental timing. President Bush later described the evening as perfectly orchestrated, never realizing that he had just witnessed crisis management at its most sophisticated level. But the most remarkable aspect of the evening wasn't the crisis that was averted, it was the positive relationship building that occurred through carefully managed authentic moments. The Queen had identified several opportunities for genuine connection between Bush and British officials, and she used modified signal protocols to create space for these interactions. During the dessert course, when conversation turned to family values and education, topics where Bush felt genuinely passionate, the Queen suspended formal protocols entirely, allowing for the kind of authentic exchange that builds real diplomatic relationships. Her ability to recognize and nurture these moments of genuine connection while maintaining strict control over potentially dangerous topics demonstrated the evolution of royal diplomacy since Diana's influence. Prince Philip's role in the evening showcased another dimension of royal signal mastery. His reputation for blunt speaking was actually an asset in this situation. It allowed him to ask direct questions and make pointed observations that gave Bush opportunities to clarify American positions without feeling attacked. Philip's approach appeared spontaneous, but every comment had been carefully planned to serve specific diplomatic purposes. The international implications of the evening extended far beyond the immediate dinner conversation. Foreign diplomats and intelligence services from multiple countries were analyzing every aspect of the royal family's behavior for clues about British attitudes toward American policy. The signals had to be sophisticated enough to avoid sending unintended messages to these highly trained observers. The Queen's handling of press interactions during the evening demonstrated another level of signal mastery. She knew that certain gestures would be photographed and analyzed globally, so she used this awareness strategically. A warm smile during Bush's toast would be seen as endorsement of American leadership, while a more reserved expression might suggest disapproval of specific policies. The solution was brilliant in its subtlety. The Queen's facial expressions remained warmly professional throughout, but she varied the timing and intensity of her responses to communicate nuanced messages. When Bush spoke about shared values, her enthusiasm was genuine and immediate. When he mentioned military action, her response was respectful but delayed by precisely 2 seconds, long enough for experienced observers to note the distinction without creating obvious diplomatic tension. Behind the scenes, royal staff were managing an even more complex communication network. Every observation about American delegates' behavior, every overheard comment, every noted reaction was being processed and analyzed for intelligence value. The dinner wasn't just diplomacy, it was an intelligence-gathering operation disguised as hospitality. The most sensitive aspect involved managing information flow to British intelligence services. Certain observations about American officials' attitudes and concerns needed to be communicated to British security services, but this had to be done without compromising the royal family's diplomatic neutrality. The solution involved a subset of signals known only to the most senior staff, allowing critical information to be passed along without the royal family appearing to engage in espionage. The success of the evening was measured not just in avoided conflicts, but in positive outcomes that emerged from carefully managed authentic interactions. Several important policy discussions between British and American officials were initiated based on connections made during dinner conversations that the Queen had strategically facilitated. Perhaps most importantly, President Bush left with a genuine appreciation for the complexity and sophistication of British diplomatic traditions. His later comments about the Queen's wisdom and the value of the special relationship reflected authentic respect that had been carefully cultivated through the evening's interactions. The diplomatic challenges didn't end when dinner concluded. The Queen had to manage post-dinner conversations, gift exchanges, and departure protocols with the same attention to signal management that had governed the formal meal. Every moment remained an opportunity for misunderstanding or diplomatic success. The final signal of the evening was perhaps the most important. As President Bush prepared to leave, the Queen walked him to his car personally, a gesture of respect she reserved for only the most significant occasions. This action communicated to global observers that regardless of policy disagreements, the fundamental relationship between Britain and America remained strong and valued. The international media coverage the following day reflected the evening's success. Headlines focused on the warm reception Bush received and the enduring strength of Anglo-American friendship, rather than on policy divisions or diplomatic tensions. The careful signal management had achieved exactly what it was designed to accomplish. Years later, diplomatic historians would study this dinner as a perfect example of how traditional royal protocols could be adapted to manage contemporary international challenges. The evening demonstrated that the ancient art of royal signal communication remained relevant and powerful in an era of global politics and instant media coverage. The lessons learned from managing the Bush visit influenced how the royal family approached subsequent diplomatic challenges. The integration of traditional signal protocols with authentic relationship building became a model for royal diplomatic engagement that balanced institutional requirements with genuine human connection. Most significantly, the evening proved that the royal family's centuries of experience in reading and influencing human behavior remained one of Britain's most valuable diplomatic assets. In an age of international uncertainty and cultural misunderstanding, the ability to communicate complex messages through subtle signals provided a diplomatic advantage that no amount of military or economic power could replace. The future of royal communication revealed itself on a Tuesday morning in October 2023, when Princess Charlotte, at age 8, unconsciously performed a signal sequence so sophisticated that it stunned even veteran palace staff. During a private family breakfast at Windsor Castle, she had managed to communicate complex information about her brother George's mood, alert her grandfather to a potential security concern she had noticed outside, and coordinate with her mother about weekend plans, all while appearing to do nothing more than eat her cereal and chat about school. What Charlotte demonstrated that morning was the emergence of a new generation of royals who weren't just learning the traditional signal system, they were evolving it. Born into an age of social media, constant surveillance, and global connectivity, these young royals were developing communication skills that adapted centuries-old protocols to contemporary challenges that their predecessors never could have imagined. King Charles III, who had spent decades mastering the traditional signal system under his mother's guidance, found himself in the unprecedented position of learning from his grandchildren. Charlotte and George had developed what palace analysts called digital age signaling, a hybrid system that worked equally well whether they were being photographed by professional cameras, monitored by security systems, or observed by the countless unofficial cameras that now documented royal life constantly. The most remarkable aspect of this evolution was how naturally it occurred. Nobody had consciously decided to update royal signal protocols for the modern era. Instead, the children had intuitively adapted to their environment, developing communication methods that were invisible to digital surveillance while remaining effective in traditional royal contexts. Princess Charlotte's breakthrough moment that October morning involved what appeared to be a simple gesture of pushing her hair behind her ear. In traditional royal signaling, this movement would have meant nothing significant. But Charlotte had unconsciously modified the gesture to account for the presence of multiple security cameras in the breakfast room. By adjusting the angle and timing of the movement, she was able to communicate with her mother while ensuring that none of the security recordings would capture anything that looked like deliberate signaling. This represented a fundamental shift in how royal communication needed to evolve. Previous generations of royals had only needed to consider human observers when using signal protocols. The current generation had to account for multiple types of technological surveillance, each with different capabilities and limitations. Their signaling had to be invisible not just to untrained human eyes, but to artificial intelligence systems designed to analyze human behavior for security purposes. Prince George, though younger and less naturally inclined toward complex communication than his sister, had developed his own innovations. His contribution was what palace staff privately called chaos signaling, the ability to create deliberate disorder that masked intentional communication. During public appearances, George could create enough authentic childlike distraction to provide cover for more subtle family communications that needed to occur without public observation. The royal family's response to these innovations was fascinating. Rather than discouraging the children's natural adaptations, King Charles and Queen Camilla worked with palace communication experts to understand and formalize these new approaches. They recognized that the monarchy's survival had always depended on its ability to evolve while maintaining continuity, and these young royals were showing them how to maintain traditional values while adapting to contemporary realities. The most significant challenge was training staff to recognize and support these evolved signal systems. Veterans who had mastered traditional royal protocols found themselves learning entirely new forms of communication from children barely old enough for primary school. The psychological adjustment required was substantial. These experienced professionals had to acknowledge that their expertise needed updating by individuals who couldn't yet tie their own shoes reliably. Queen Camilla became the primary bridge between traditional and evolved signaling approaches. Her position as step-grandmother, rather than grandmother by blood, gave her a unique perspective on both the established royal culture and the changing needs of the young family. She developed what became known as the Camilla Protocol's hybrid signal systems that honored traditional royal communication while incorporating the innovations developed by Charlotte and George. The international implications of these changes were profound. Foreign diplomats and intelligence services had spent decades learning to read traditional royal signals, and, suddenly, they were faced with communication methods that their training hadn't prepared them to interpret. This created both challenges and opportunities for British diplomacy. The advantages were significant. Other nations' analysts were having difficulty understanding British royal behavior, which gave Britain diplomatic advantages in situations where traditional royal signaling had previously been too well understood by foreign observers. The royal family could communicate complex information without worrying about international intelligence services accurately interpreting their discussions. However, this evolution also created risks. If foreign diplomats misunderstood royal signals during important negotiations, diplomatic incidents could result from simple communication failures. The palace had to develop new protocols for international events that ensured important messages could be communicated clearly while maintaining the security advantages of evolved signaling. The most fascinating aspect of this evolution was how it reflected broader changes in human communication patterns. The royal children weren't just adapting royal protocols, they were unconsciously incorporating communication styles they had learned from digital media, social interactions, and contemporary culture. Their signaling methods revealed how an entire generation was learning to communicate in a world where privacy was rare and authentic expression required increasing sophistication. Prince William and Princess Catherine faced unique challenges as parents trying to guide their children's development of these communication skills. They needed to encourage the natural evolution that would serve their children well in the modern world while ensuring that traditional royal values and responsibilities weren't lost in the adaptation process. The solution they developed involved what palace education specialists called layered communication training. The children learned traditional royal protocols as a foundation, then were encouraged to explore modifications that served contemporary needs, and, finally, were taught how to switch seamlessly between different communication modes depending on the situation and audience. This approach produced remarkable results. By age 10, Charlotte could conduct completely different types of conversations with her great-uncle Prince Andrew, traditional signals, her school friends, contemporary communication, and international media, evolved royal protocols, all within the same afternoon. Her ability to code-switch between communication styles was more sophisticated than what most adults ever develop. The implications extended beyond the immediate royal family. Staff, security personnel, and even extended family members had to adapt to communication methods that changed depending on context. Garden parties, state dinners, and private family gatherings all required different approaches to signal interpretation and response. Perhaps most remarkably, the evolved signal system began influencing other aspects of royal protocol. The children's natural adaptations revealed inefficiencies and outdated aspects of traditional systems that hadn't been obvious to adults who had grown up within those systems. Their fresh perspectives led to broader modernization efforts that strengthened the monarchy's effectiveness while preserving its essential character. The long-term implications of these changes are still emerging. As Charlotte and George mature, their evolved communication styles will likely influence how the monarchy approaches everything from public engagement to international diplomacy. They represent a generation of royals who will navigate challenges their predecessors never imagined while maintaining traditions that have served the institution for centuries. The most profound realization for the royal family was that effective communication had never been about rigid adherence to specific protocols, it had always been about understanding human nature and adapting to serve institutional needs while maintaining authentic relationships. The children's innovations reminded everyone that the signal system's greatest strength had always been its ability to evolve while preserving core principles. Looking toward the future, palace planners are working to understand how royal communication might continue evolving as technology advances and social expectations change. The challenge is maintaining the sophistication and effectiveness that have served the monarchy so well while remaining relevant to generations that will grow up in an even more connected and transparent world. The story of royal table signals, from their origins in medieval survival needs through their contemporary evolution in the hands of 8-year-old Princess Charlotte, reveals something fundamental about human communication itself. The most effective systems aren't those that resist change, but those that adapt continuously while preserving essential purposes and values. The silent language of royal dining tables continues to evolve, carrying forward centuries of wisdom while embracing innovations that ensure its relevance for generations to come. In the hands of young royals who understand both tradition and change, these ancient communication arts are being transformed into tools that will serve the monarchy well in whatever challenges the future may bring.